Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. I want to discuss a discovery made last month along the Texas-Mexico border that reveals just how sophisticated and determined drug cartels have become in their efforts to smuggle drugs, weapons, and people into the United States. In December 2025, the FBI, working with U.S. Border Patrol and Homeland Security investigations, announced the discovery of one of the most sophisticated cartel smuggling tunnels ever found along the Texas border. This tunnel stretched over half a mile underground from Mexico into Texas, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and rail systems for moving drugs and people. What makes this discovery significant isn't just the tunnel itself, it's what it represents. Building a tunnel of this size requires millions of dollars, months, or even years of construction, and the ability to operate undetected right under border security's watch. This shows cartels view smuggling into the U.S. as a long-term business investment worth enormous expense and effort. Today, I'm walking you through how this tunnel was discovered, how it was constructed, what federal authorities found inside, and what this tells us about the ongoing challenge of securing our southern border. On December 18, 2025, the FBI announced federal agents had discovered a large-scale smuggling tunnel near Eagle Pass, Texas. Eagle Pass is a city of about 30,000 people located directly on the Rio Grande River, which forms the border between Texas and Mexico. The city sits across from Piedras Negras, a much larger Mexican city with over 170,000 residents. The tunnel's entrance on the U.S. side was in a warehouse facility approximately 1 mile north of the border. The warehouse appeared legitimate from the outside, but federal agents discovered it had been purchased by individuals connected to the Cartel Del Noreste, a faction of the notorious Zetas cartel controlling territory in the Mexican state of Coahuila, directly across from Eagle Pass. The tunnel was approximately 2,800 feet long, more than half a mile. It started from a building in Piedras Negras, Mexico, passed underneath the Rio Grande River at a depth of roughly 70 feet, continued under U.S. territory, and emerged in the Eagle Pass warehouse. Federal agents described the tunnel as highly sophisticated. It was reinforced with concrete and wooden supports to prevent collapse. Electric lighting ran throughout its entire length. A ventilation system pumped fresh air through to make it breathable. And most remarkably, it had a rail system, essentially a small electric railway, used to transport loads of drugs, weapons, cash, and possibly people without requiring manual carrying. When federal agents raided the warehouse and explored the tunnel, they found evidence of active use. They seized approximately 200 pounds of cocaine, 800 pounds of methamphetamine, 350 pounds of fentanyl, 90 pounds of heroin, 15 assault-style rifles and multiple handguns, approximately $240,000 in cash. The operation resulted in 11 arrests, 7 on the U.S. side and 4 in Mexico, through coordination with Mexican federal authorities. The lead defendant was identified as Hector Villarreal, a 43-year-old man federal prosecutors say managed the tunnel operation for the Cartel Del Noreste. All 11 defendants face federal charges, including conspiracy to import controlled substances, conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute narcotics, and participation in a continuing criminal enterprise. Given the drug quantities involved, they're facing mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years to life in federal prison if convicted. Drug smuggling tunnels aren't new. Cartels have used tunnels to smuggle drugs into the U.S. since at least the early 1990s. The first major tunnel was discovered in 1990 in Arizona, connecting the Mexican city of Agua Prieta with Douglas, Arizona. But tunnel construction and sophistication have evolved dramatically over 3 decades. Early tunnels were crude, often just hand-dug passages barely large enough to crawl through. They were unstable, poorly ventilated, and extremely dangerous. Modern cartel tunnels like the one in Eagle Pass are engineering marvels. They're designed by professional engineers, constructed using mining techniques, and equipped with systems that make them safe and efficient for smuggling operations. Cartels have learned that tunnels, despite requiring enormous upfront investment, offer significant advantages over other smuggling methods. Once operational, a tunnel provides a reliable, weather-independent route that doesn't depend on getting past border checkpoints, avoiding patrol agents, or hiding drugs in vehicles that might be inspected. From a business perspective, cartels view tunnels as infrastructure investments. If a tunnel costs $5 million to construct, but allows the cartel to smuggle $10 million worth of drugs per month, it pays for itself in 6 months and generates enormous profits afterward. The Eagle Pass tunnel was particularly sophisticated. FBI engineers who examined it said the construction required professional engineering and mining expertise. The tunnel had to pass under the Rio Grande at sufficient depth to avoid detection, but without going so deep that construction became impractical. It had to be reinforced to withstand soil and water pressure, and it had to be built without triggering border security sensors, ground-penetrating radar, or other detection systems. Federal investigators believe construction began in late 2023 or early 2024, taking approximately 18 to 24 months to complete. During that time, cartel operatives had to excavate thousands of tons of dirt and rock, dispose of material without attracting attention, install infrastructure, and do all this while avoiding detection. The tunnel's location in Eagle Pass is significant. Eagle Pass has been one of the busiest crossing points for illegal immigration over the past few years. During the peak of the border crisis in 2023 and 2024, thousands of migrants crossed into Eagle Pass daily. Border Patrol resources were overwhelmed dealing with the surge. Federal investigators believe cartels deliberately chose Eagle Pass for this tunnel because Border Patrol was so focused on migrants that they had limited resources to look for tunnels or other smuggling infrastructure. The cartel essentially used the migration crisis as cover to build smuggling infrastructure. The Cartel Del Noreste, which operated this tunnel, is one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. The group formed in 2014 when it split from the Zetas cartel during an internal power struggle. Since then, the Cartel del Noreste has controlled territory in the Mexican states of Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas, all bordering Texas. The organization traffics drugs and people, extorts businesses, kidnaps for ransom, and engages in various criminal activities. They're known for extreme violence, including massacres, public displays designed to terrorize populations, and brutal treatment of rivals and perceived traitors. For the Cartel del Noreste, this tunnel represented a strategic investment in moving drugs into the lucrative U.S. market. Texas is both a destination for drugs and a distribution hub for moving product to other parts of the country. A reliable smuggling route into Eagle Pass gave the cartel access to drug markets throughout the American South and beyond. The investigation that led to the tunnel's discovery actually began in mid-2025, but it didn't start with the tunnel itself. It started with routine law enforcement work that gradually uncovered a larger smuggling operation. In June 2025, Border Patrol agents in the Eagle Pass sector noticed unusual patterns in drug seizures. They were finding significant quantities of cocaine and methamphetamine in vehicles and during arrests of suspected smugglers, and the drugs appeared to be coming from the Eagle Pass area specifically rather than passing through from elsewhere. Typically, when drugs are smuggled across the border, they might pass through one area but are stored and distributed from a different location. But in this case, agents noticed drugs consistently appearing in Eagle Pass itself, suggesting a significant smuggling operation based in or near the city. Border Patrol shared this intelligence with the FBI and Homeland Security investigations, launching a joint investigation. They started surveillance in Eagle Pass, looking for suspicious activity indicating drug smuggling operations. Over several months, investigators identified individuals who appeared involved in drug trafficking. They documented meetings, observed vehicles traveling between locations, and began developing a picture of an organized smuggling network. One location drew particular attention, a warehouse facility on Eagle Pass's north side. Investigators observed vehicles arriving at odd hours, usually late at night or very early morning. Vehicles would enter the warehouse, remain inside for 30 to 60 minutes, then leave. This pattern suggested the warehouse was a transfer point for drugs or contraband. Federal agents obtained court authorization to place the warehouse under surveillance and monitor communications of individuals associated with it. Over time, they identified Hector Villarreal as the person managing warehouse operations. In October 2025, federal agents made a breakthrough. Through electronic surveillance, they intercepted communications between Villarreal and associates in Mexico discussing moving loads through the route and problems with the lights in the passage. These communications suggested some kind of tunnel or hidden route for smuggling. Federal investigators began specifically looking for evidence of a tunnel. They obtained architectural plans for the warehouse and noticed the building's layout didn't quite match the plans. There appeared to be an interior space larger than what the exterior dimensions suggested. Federal agents also deployed ground-penetrating radar around the warehouse. Ground-penetrating radar sends radio waves into the ground and measures reflections, revealing underground voids, structures, or anomalies. The radar indicated a large void space beneath the warehouse extending southward toward the border. By late November, federal investigators had enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for the warehouse. They also coordinated with Mexican federal authorities to simultaneously investigate properties on the Mexican side that might connect to the tunnel. On December 17th, federal agents executed the search warrant. When they entered the warehouse, they found what appeared to be a normal commercial space with stored equipment and supplies. But when agents searched more carefully, they discovered a concealed entrance to the tunnel hidden behind a false wall in a storage room. The entrance was a vertical shaft approximately 10 feet deep with a ladder leading down. At the bottom was the entrance to the main tunnel, stretching south toward Mexico. Federal agents, including FBI tactical teams and Border Patrol tactical units, entered the tunnel and followed it to the Mexican side. The tunnel emerged in a building in Piedras Negras. Mexican federal police, coordinating with U.S. authorities, raided that building simultaneously and arrested 4 individuals present. As agents explored the tunnel, they discovered its remarkable sophistication. The tunnel was approximately 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, large enough to walk through comfortably. Walls and ceiling were reinforced with concrete and wooden supports. Electric lights were installed every 20 feet along the entire length. A ventilation system with electric fans pumped fresh air through, and a rail system similar to a minecart railway ran the tunnel's length. At various points, agents found drugs apparently stored for transport. They also found evidence of regular use, including tools, communications equipment, and personal items left by tunnel workers or smugglers. The total seizure from the warehouse and tunnel included 200 pounds of cocaine, 800 pounds of methamphetamine, 350 pounds of fentanyl, 90 pounds of heroin, 15 assault rifles, multiple handguns, and $240,000 in cash. At the top were Cartel Del Noreste leaders based in Mexico. These leaders made the strategic decision to invest in building the tunnel, provided financing for construction, and directed how it would be used. While these top leaders haven't been arrested or publicly identified, federal investigators know they exist based on intercepted communications. Below the cartel leadership was Hector Villarreal, whom federal prosecutors describe as the tunnel manager on the U.S. side. Villarreal's role was overseeing warehouse operations, coordinating receipt of drug shipments coming through the tunnel, arranging distribution of those drugs to U.S. buyers, and managing smuggling logistics. Evidence shows Villarreal communicated regularly with contacts in Mexico about tunnel operations. When drugs were ready for transport, Mexican operatives would notify Villarreal. He'd then ensure the warehouse was ready to receive the shipment and vehicles were available to transport drugs to their next destination. Below Villarreal were individuals with specific operational roles. Some handled security at the warehouse, watching for law enforcement surveillance and ensuring operations weren't observed. Others handled the drugs, moving them from the tunnel entrance to transport vehicles. Still others were drivers transporting drugs from the warehouse to distribution points elsewhere in Texas or other states. The tunnel itself was operated by specialized personnel. The Cartel Del Noreste employed individuals specifically trained to work in the tunnel environment. These tunnel workers maintained infrastructure, operated the rail system, transported loads through the tunnel, and ensured the tunnel remained concealed and secure. The actual smuggling process worked like this. Drugs were prepared for transport in Mexico and brought to the tunnel entrance in Piedras Negras. Tunnel workers loaded drugs onto rail carts. Carts were pushed or pulled through the tunnel, a journey taking approximately 30 to 45 minutes depending on load size. When carts reached the U.S. side, workers unloaded drugs and brought them up to the warehouse floor. Drugs were then loaded into vehicles for transport to customers. The warehouse itself had been purchased using a shell company to hide cartel ownership. The company appeared to be a legitimate logistics business, providing cover for constant vehicle traffic. Security measures were extensive. The warehouse had surveillance cameras allowing operatives to watch for law enforcement. Workers used encrypted communications apps to coordinate activities and avoid interception. The tunnel entrance was concealed behind a false wall not obvious during casual inspection, and workers were instructed to destroy evidence and flee if they believed law enforcement was approaching. But despite these precautions, the FBI's patient, months-long investigation penetrated the operation, gathered evidence, and ultimately shut it down. By the numbers. The tunnel discovered in Eagle Pass is the 12th major smuggling tunnel found along the Texas border since 2010. That might not sound like many compared to other parts of the border, but it reflects the fact that the Texas border is different from California or Arizona in ways that make tunnel construction more difficult. Much of the Texas-Mexico border is defined by the Rio Grande River, creating a natural barrier. Building a tunnel under a river is significantly more complicated and expensive than building under dry land. The tunnel has to go deeper to avoid water infiltration, requires more sophisticated engineering, and is riskier to construct. This is why most smuggling tunnels have historically been found in California and Arizona rather than Texas. But as border security has improved in other areas, cartels have become willing to invest in the more difficult and expensive Texas tunnels because they view it as worth the investment for a reliable smuggling route. The Eagle Pass Tunnel at 2,800 feet long is one of the longest tunnels ever discovered along the entire U.S.-Mexico border. For comparison, most tunnels are under 1,000 feet long. The exceptional length, combined with its sophistication, suggests the Cartel Del Noreste invested several $million in its construction. Federal engineers who examined the tunnel estimated that excavating and reinforcing a tunnel of this size would have required at least 18 to 24 months of work and cost between $5 and $8 million when factoring in the cost of purchasing properties on both sides of the border, paying workers, purchasing materials and equipment, and bribing officials who might otherwise interfere with construction. But from the cartel's perspective, this investment was worthwhile because of the profits generated. The drugs seized when the tunnel was discovered, approximately 200 pounds of cocaine, 800 pounds of methamphetamine, 350 pounds of fentanyl, and 90 pounds of heroin, had a combined street value of approximately $18 million. That's just one load that happened to be in the tunnel when federal agents raided it. Federal investigators believe the tunnel had been in active operation for approximately 6 to 9 months before discovery. If used 2 to 3 times per week during that period, it could have been used for over 100 separate smuggling runs. If we conservatively estimate each smuggling run involved drugs with a street value of $10 million, the tunnel could have smuggled over $1 billion worth of drugs into the United States during its operational period. Even accounting for the fact that cartels sell drugs at wholesale prices much lower than street value, the tunnel likely generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for the Cartel Del Noreste. The weapons seized, 15 assault rifles and multiple handguns, represent another security threat. These weapons were likely being smuggled south into Mexico, where Mexican law makes it difficult for cartels to legally obtain firearms. Cartels purchase or steal weapons in the United States, where they're more readily available, and smuggle them into Mexico for cartel operations. This case demonstrates the enormous resources and determination cartels bring to the smuggling business. Building a tunnel over half a mile long, passing under a river with sophisticated infrastructure requires millions of dollars, professional engineering expertise, months or years of construction time, and the ability to avoid detection throughout that entire period. The fact that the Cartel Del Noreste was willing to make this investment shows they view smuggling into the U.S. as a core business activity worth almost any expense. As long as there's demand for drugs in the United States and those drugs command high prices, cartels will continue investing in whatever infrastructure is necessary to supply that demand. This creates a fundamental challenge for border security. The United States has invested billions of dollars in border walls, fencing, sensors, cameras, and personnel, and those investments have been effective in making traditional smuggling methods harder. But when cartels respond by going underground, literally building tunnels beneath border barriers, it requires entirely different detection and response capabilities. Detecting tunnels requires ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors that can detect underground excavation, intelligence gathering to identify suspicious activity, and patient investigation to track smuggling networks back to their infrastructure. Even with all these tools, tunnels can be extremely difficult to find before they're completed and operational. Second, this case highlights the relationship between illegal immigration and drug smuggling. The tunnel was built in Eagle Pass during a period when the city experienced a massive surge of illegal immigration. Border Patrol resources were overwhelmed dealing with thousands of migrants crossing daily. Federal investigators believe the cartel deliberately exploited this situation. While Border Patrol focused on apprehending migrants, processing them, and managing humanitarian aspects of the border crisis, the cartel used that distraction as cover to build smuggling infrastructure. This demonstrates why effective border security requires addressing both illegal immigration and drug smuggling simultaneously. When one problem overwhelms available resources, it creates opportunities for criminals to exploit security gaps. Third, this case shows the importance of cooperation between U.S. and Mexican law enforcement. The tunnel could only be completely shut down because Mexican federal police coordinated with U.S. authorities to raid the Mexican side simultaneously with the U.S. raid. If Mexican authorities hadn't acted, the people operating the Mexican side would have simply fled and potentially established operations elsewhere. But cooperation with Mexican authorities is often complicated by corruption. Cartels frequently bribe Mexican police, military personnel, and government officials. There have been cases where information shared with Mexican authorities about planned enforcement operations has been leaked to cartels, allowing them to escape or destroy evidence before raids occur. In this case, U.S. authorities trusted their Mexican counterparts enough to coordinate the operation. But in many other cases, U.S. law enforcement is reluctant to share sensitive information with Mexican authorities because of corruption concerns. Fourth, this case raises questions about how many other tunnels might exist that haven't been discovered yet. If the Cartel Del Noreste invested millions of dollars and 2 years of effort into building one tunnel, it's reasonable to assume they and other cartels are building others. For every tunnel discovered, there may be others that remain operational and undetected. This is particularly concerning when you consider tunnels can be used not just for drug smuggling, but potentially for other security threats. A tunnel large enough to move drugs could also move weapons, cash, fugitives, or even terrorists if a terrorist organization paid a cartel for access. Where do we go from here? The tunnel in Eagle Pass has been permanently closed. Federal agents filled it with concrete to prevent it from ever being used again. The warehouse on the U.S. side has been seized by the federal government and will eventually be sold with proceeds supporting law enforcement activities. The 11 defendants arrested in connection with the tunnel face federal prosecution. Hector Villarreal, as the alleged manager, faces the most serious charges. If convicted, he could be sentenced to life in federal prison given the drug quantities involved. The other defendants also face mandatory minimum sentences of 10 to 20 years. But closing one tunnel and prosecuting its operators doesn't solve the broader problem. The Cartel Del Noreste continues operating, continues smuggling drugs, and may very well be planning or constructing additional tunnels or developing other smuggling methods. The Department of Homeland Security has announced they're increasing resources dedicated to tunnel detection along the Texas border. They're deploying additional ground-penetrating radar systems, training more personnel in tunnel detection techniques, and increasing coordination between Border Patrol, FBI, and other agencies to identify suspicious activity indicating tunnel construction. Congress has also been briefed on the tunnel discovery, and there have been discussions about providing additional funding for border security technology specifically designed to detect and prevent tunnel smuggling. For all of us following these issues, this tunnel discovery serves as a reminder that border security is an ongoing challenge requiring constant vigilance, significant resources, and innovative approaches to stay ahead of sophisticated criminal organizations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.